Three, two, one, and we're live. Welcome back to the Unbridled Living in Costa Rica podcast. Today we have a very different and a very exciting, I'm pretty excited about today's podcast because we're going to be talking about people of color. And, that's always a big question. Well, what color are we talking about? I'm white color. Rebecca's like extremely white. But there's, I think when people are asking that question, most of the time they're asking about Black people in Costa Rica versus white people or other people. We're going to be talking about all that. Are Ticos prejudiced? I think you're going to be surprised at the answer. Okay. But we're going to be diving into all of that good information and kind of find out, hey, did I ever experience any prejudice issues in Costa Rica? How about Rebecca? And would Black people, Mexicans, Nicaraguans, Panamanians, what is the facts? And hey, we've been here 11 years in Costa Rica just about, so we definitely can give you some inside information about people of color in Costa Rica. Now, before we get started, who are we?
I'm Rebecca. This is Alan, and we have been living in Costa Rica for next month will be 11 years. We've been here since 2013, and that's about it.
So do we have any experience being in Costa Rica?
Yeah, we have experience, but as we say, this is our experience. It's from our
and like you always say, if they don't agree, they can just get off your channel.
Yeah, right.
Yes, yeah. Like Rebecca was saying, hey, we are sharing our perspective, our experience. And you know what? Your perspective may not be the same. So it doesn't mean you have to agree, but it does,
right. And other people's experiences, depending on where they are and what groups of people they hang around with, it could be totally different from ours.
Absolutely. So it's always good to take time to, hey, watch other channels and find out their perspective.
For sure. Definitely. Because we have a very unique, I suppose, experience that may not be the typical. So, you want to definitely get some perspectives from other people. But before we go too much further, let the people know that we're not going to be on next Sunday.
Well, you just did it.
Well, you say it better.
So while you're here, and before we actually dive in, yes, next Sunday, I'll be heading to San Jose. Going to take care of some VA stuff, some veteran stuff. Hey, I might let you know more about that. I'm actually doing a little bit of investigating to find out about whether veterans, what are some of the stuff veterans, is it easy for veterans, hard for veterans, all that good stuff. Anyway, so we won't make our live next Sunday, and we'll pick up right after that. But hey, before we dive into it, what's been happening on the off-grid homestead?
A little bit.
We didn't get as much done this week as I would like to have got done. But let's find out what did we get accomplished.
This past week, we had a booger bear of a rain. That brought a lot of water and some damage to our mile-long driveway. There was no sitting at my favorite spot on the river for a couple of days. And this is probably the largest I've seen our waterfall. It usually looks a lot like this, except for the month of October, when the rains are the heaviest. So you can see how one day of rain can drastically change things and make some roads impassable in just one day. My neighbor, along with his 79-year-old father, who, by the way, can outwork most guys half his age, and that's what Costa Rica Living can do for you if you let it. Well, we spent nearly a whole day doing maintenance on our driveway. And one day this week, I had to go do a little maintenance on my artesian spring that delivers us all this great water. It was just a simple cleaning of the filter, and man, it is amazing to see how much water is coming out of those rocks. But let's get back to work. Last week, I did get my sink installed, but I still needed to do a lot of sanding on the countertop. But before getting it all sanded, well, I decided I need to cut another hole. As much as I enjoy cooking, I decided to buy a much better stove and now needed to cut a hole to install it. Then it was back to sanding in order to get all those saw blade marks off the counter. And that seemed to take forever. But finally, I was able to switch to my palm sander and put the finishing touches to the sanding of the countertop. While this countertop might not be the best, it was all I could find in a pinch. And, well, it definitely has a lot of character, and the grain is really starting to come through. I think it really looks pretty good. But now it's time to decide what color should we stain the countertop. I've tested a few different colors that Rebecca requested, and I'm really not keen on any of them, but finding a good stain in Costa Rica is a challenge. Not a lot of selection, but Rebecca did pick a stain that's kind of dark, and up here we have one that's just, well, the stain on there wiped off, and it's just a really light coat. And she didn't kind of like some of the colors and said, well, let's try mixing some whites, you know. So we took some white paint and just wiped it off, and thinking maybe a white wash, didn't look good at all. And so I put some white on top of stain. That didn't look good. Mixed a little bit of white paint, kind of half white, half stain. That came out kind of a bluish looking color, which wasn't great. And then over here, we ended up staining one coat of stain, or I think this is actually 2 coats, and then just a light sand. And then this here's 3 coats, and it's a lot darker. I like this. It's really a rich brown color, and I like this, but Rebecca likes this here. She prefers this. So anyway, hey, you tell me, which do you like, and put that in the comments below. And there's our office deck. Realize that, I need to go ahead and close in this side right here and close in this top before I actually move the counter into place. So I've got it up on its side, and I've paid in a couple of panels. Those panels are going to go right over here. Then I had to cut another very large piece of ply rock. So this stuff is expensive, and I had to buy a whole sheet just to get this piece that's going to go, well, this is the front. It's actually going to go on the back side, on the opposite side, to close in that. So then now that will be closed in this way, when there's drawers here, nothing can go all the way through. It'll be closed in. And of course, while we're waiting on that stain and figuring that out, I'm having to weld some pieces here. So those pieces are going to go right down there, because we'll put some ply rock to go in there and close that in. This way, this office section will actually, the walls will be done and ready for whenever we move the counter into that space. Because once the counter's in space, we can't move it anymore. I'm done sanding the countertop, and it really does look nice, has great character. And now it's just time to decide, well, what stain do we want to put on this countertop?
All right. So, hey, not a whole lot accomplished this week, but hey, next week, I believe this week we're going to really get a lot of stuff done, provided we don't run into any surprise things. In Costa Rica, you just never know. But it's all an adventure, so it's all good for us. All right. So, hey, before we get started talking about people of color or Black people in Costa Rica, or any color, let me give you a little bit of background on where I came from. Okay, so I grew up very, very poor in the United States. I wanted to break out of being poor. And so my family was very poor. Well, I actually started working full time when I was 12 years old. And while I was going to school, even at an early age, some of my best friends were Black people. Matter of fact, one very good friend of mine, Norman, he's a pastor now. He, of course, his father was a pastor. But anyway, I spent a lot of nights at his house. Man, we would spend the night in the feed barn, and we'd go catfishing all night. We just had a blast. And, as I grew up, working in that grocery store, The butcher was a black guy. He and I were great friends. At the time, I wasn't old enough to legally be drinking beer. But hey, I was over at his house all the time. And hey, I was around his family. We'd eat supper together, drink beer together, have a good time together. And so when I say I grew up with a lot of black people, okay? And whenever I started working because my parents were deaf, I started working as an interpreter in the schools. And one of the students I interpreted for was a young black girl. Well, fast forward, I got married to this deaf girl and was going to a church. And as I was going to this Baptist church, almost every church we'd go to, I'd sit on the front pew and I'd interpret for my wife. And so the pastor would always, we got to start a deaf ministry. So obviously we'd start this deaf ministry. Most of the time it was only my wife there, but, always was inviting people. Well, I was going to invite this black girl. She was about 12 years old and she wanted to come to church with me. So one day, just in conversation and passing, I told the pastor, hey, I'm going to invite, I can't even remember her name, but this young black girl that I interpret for in school. And the pastor says, well, I don't have a problem with that, but maybe that's not a good idea. And I'm like, well, what do you mean it's not a good idea? He says, well, they have their own church. And I'm like, well, who's they? He said, well, black people. I'm like, we don't have black people in our church. And I thought about it a moment. And I says, well, you know what? You're right. We don't have any black people in our church. Well, see, I've never seen color. I've always just, I looked at people as people. So at that moment, from right then, it took me about 5 seconds to think about it. And I said, well, you know what? When you asked me to start a deaf ministry, and I agreed, I didn't say that I agreed to start a deaf ministry for only white deaf people. I'm starting a deaf ministry for everybody that's deaf. I don't see color. So you won't see me here on Sunday. And I left and in search of another church. So with just one little bit more background, I grew up in a very poor family, but my parents, they were prejudiced. Now, were they extreme racists? No, but they were prejudiced. And so I was kind of taught to be prejudiced, but I never was. I always thought, well, that ain't right. So I grew up very, very different. And I think Rebecca, pretty much the same. How did you grow up? I mean, was your family prejudiced? How did you have friends that was prejudiced?
No, not really, no.
So, and I grew up in South Louisiana, like Rebecca, where there was some prejudice. So if anyone could have been prejudiced, I definitely could have been. So we're talking about, Costa Rica. Okay. So now keep in mind the United States, at one point in time, I believe there was a lot of prejudice. Is it now? Is it that way now? I really don't know. I haven't been there in 11 years, but we're talking about Costa Rica, not the United States. So after 11 years in Costa Rica, did you experience any prejudice in Costa Rica? Never. And
I'm a big minority. I stand out.
You do stand out.
Yeah. The only thing I really like, I blend in as far as my height, because in the U.S. I was so short, but here I'm taller than some people. So,
so now some people say, well, you can't say, you're not black, so you can't say you've experienced any prejudice. Well, there are some facts to that.
Well, I'm very, very white compared to, like when we go places in public, I stand out.
Right. So now, through all that time that we've been here in Costa Rica, I can tell you that, I do a lot with the locals. I mean, I do a whole lot. I've got a bunch of locals that work for me. I work right in the middle with them. I'm at their homes all the time eating. And, I like to always ask questions and interact. And I can tell you that the locals, Ticos, are they prejudiced? Okay, so I'm going to say the answer is yes and no. Okay, because most people immediately say, oh, they're not prejudiced. Well, you probably don't know them like I do. Okay, because the Ticos, the locals, most of the Ticos, they're prejudiced. They're prejudiced toward Panamanians, and that's because the Panamanians think they're better than the Ticos. Well, the Ticos are prejudiced toward the indigenous or the Indians of Costa Rica, and that's because the Ticos think they're better than the Indians. And then they're also prejudiced against the Nicaraguans, okay? I'm not quite sure why, but I think it's because they say, well, they come in and they cause crime and problems like that. So anyway, they're prejudiced against those three people. Now, is it everyone? Well, of course not. Not everyone is prejudiced and all that. But to be factual, yes, Ticos are prejudiced. But when it comes to foreigners coming into Costa Rica, this is where your ears should perk up, and this is where you should take note. When Ticos, when we're talking about foreigners, okay, literally the word gringo is a term that is supposed to only be for Americans, in fact, and a term that came from the war, okay, the Civil War. Now, in Costa Rica, the majority of Ticos will call every single expat or foreigner, whether you're Chinese, Canadian, American, Mexican, they're going to call every foreigner a gringo. In other words, you green is the only thing that matters to us, okay? The only thing they worried about is that money that you are bringing in. And so for the most part, the majority of the Ticos, they do not and are not prejudiced, not racist toward black, green, blue. They don't care the color of your skin. Just give me some of your money, okay? And of course, not all of them will want your money. But the only thing that's important to them, they're most Ticos, when it comes to foreigners, very, very friendly. Do you disagree with any of that?
No, I agree. They're very, very welcoming, and I mean they don't see color. And you know, you mentioned like against the Nicaraguans or the Pan. That's nationalities, really. That's not you know, like race, let's say. But
well, Doug hit it on the head. He's saying the same thing you're saying. He says, I think it comes down to cultural prejudices and not a hatred of any people. And look, come on.
right. Besides, even it's not really about the color of your skin. Everybody has cultures. I mean, there are white Germans that have a different culture from white Canadians.
Well, since you're talking about it, there's black Costa Ricans in Costa Rica. And that culture, and I'm talking about on the Lemoyne side, if you technically you could say that they're black Costa Ricans, but they're totally different. They're not nowhere near the same as black people that are from the United States or maybe black people from Europe, right?
Yeah, they have a different culture.
Very different culture. So yeah, you know, you're absolutely right. And I think really, now this is just my honest opinion. I don't think prejudice has probably. I was going to say, I don't think there's ever been any prejudice toward people of color or black people in Costa Rica in forever. But that's not true, because if you actually look at the history of Costa Rica, many years ago, there was Costa Rica brought in Jamaicans, different types of black people. And they didn't want the black people. And anyway, what they wanted was all black people to be confined to the Lemoyne province.
It wasn't just black people; it was Chinese people too.
And Chinese people. So
it was Chinese and Caribbean people that were coming for work.
So at one point in time,
there was a lot of work.
Right. So at one point in time, Costa Rica indeed was prejudiced for color, or different types of people. Whereas now it's not that case. So could you compare that to the United States? I guess you could, but hey, it ain't about the United States, it's about Costa Rica. And that's what you're here for, is to find out what is life like in Costa Rica. Now, while we've been here for almost 11 years, and we've traveled all over Costa Rica, okay, Rebecca, just on the Pacific side, you know, from the center of the mountains down to the Pacific side, could you approximate over 11 years how many black people that we've actually run into in Costa Rica?
On the Pacific side?
On the Pacific side.
Very few, probably, I don't know, I'd say maybe 20 or less.
Yeah, I would agree. I would say from the Pacific side, there's probably 20 or less black people. And I don't care what country they're coming from. Let's just say their skin color was black, okay? That we've experienced. Now, when we went to go and we were living on the Caribbean side, how many black people did we see?
I found it was a pretty equal mixture of Ticos, which I think most of their heritage is Spanish and Italian. There was a healthy number of indigenous people. I think different what would you call it? Not say tribes,
Well, there were
but
several different indigenous, and they're tribes,
Yeah,
tribes of Indians.
there's different, even in this small area, there's like 5 different tribes, and Caribbean, kind of like a Jamaican. That was a mixture. It wasn't half and half. I'd say it was like a third, and a third.
But you can safely say we saw hundreds of Black people.
Oh yeah, it was mixed. It was
it was a big mixture.
Yeah.
So my point here is that I don't believe Costa Rica has a problem with color. I don't. I think they're a whole lot like me. And I watched I like to really prepare whenever I get ready to do a live. And so I watched a bunch of videos being Black, or what you need to know about being Black family, Black man, Black woman in Costa Rica. And I read hundreds and hundreds of comments, and all of them were saying what I already knew and verified what I was saying. And what all of the Black people and all of the comments were saying is that when I go to Costa Rica, I feel like I am being seen as a person and not a Black person. And so, man, a lot of them were saying, hey.
Yeah, they treat visitors and foreigners all the same, alike.
Absolutely.
They don't treat the Chinese differently from the Europeans. There's a big mixture of people that come here, and the Costa Ricans, the Ticos, are nice and friendly to everybody.
People. Yeah. I mean, so, I can safely say, just from my own personal experience, and then after the last few days of doing a lot of research, it just verified what I already knew, is that, hey, when it comes to expats coming over here, you'll absolutely not feel any prejudice. And, I read one comment that I think kind of had a lot of truth to it. One comment from a Black person on the video said that, they said they never experienced any prejudice while they were in Costa Rica. But if they did feel any bad vibe or any prejudice, then it was prejudice coming from another expat or another gringo in Costa Rica. And that could be some truth, if it would have been someone like my own family, and I won't say family, my mom or dad, or there are some people that are extremely, and they come to live in Costa Rica. Well, if they're extremely prejudiced in the United States, they're going to be extremely prejudiced here as well, unless they change or have a heart change, right? So I think there's some truth to that if you're a person of color, a Black person, you come over and you experience back on. So anyway, we're back, and the thing was buffering there for a little bit. And I always like to kind of show some comments here. So Jim Dandy says totally inaccurate. Hey, that's okay, Jim. You do not have to agree with me. I won't get mad at you and tell you to get off my FM channel like some channels out there. We share our perspective. If you don't agree, that's quite fine, okay? And I would say, hey, if you don't agree, well, then tell me why you don't agree. And of course, he is saying Ticos are just as racist as anyone else. So from Jim's point of view, it sounds like he's saying everyone is racist. And also gringo means a white man with light skin, hair, or eyes. You're wrong. Sorry. But go and do your research. You're going to find out gringo was from the Civil War. And it simply meant that, whenever the gringos were I can't remember which one it was, but whether it was the one group of them in the Civil War dressed in green. And as soon as they'd come over the mountain, or they'd holler, go green, go green, go green. And that's where the term green go came from. So go do your research, Jim. And hey, I'd love you to prove me wrong.
I think you're mistaken about it being the Civil War.
Well, it may not be. I can't remember which war it was.
Civil War.
But I can't remember which war it was. I think it is the Civil War.
Yeah.
Well, anyway, it's a war. I'll have to be. Well, I think you're right.
It was in like Mexico, like Texas.
Yeah, I think you're right. So it was one of the wars, okay?
It wasn't a civil
Well,
war.
I think it was the
between-
Mexican War. I think it was the Mexican-American War,
maybe so.
and the Mexican. Anyway,
I don't know the name of the war, but it was way down. You know, it was not the Civil War. But anyway, like maybe some people refer to gringo as only light-skinned people or whatever. But I've experienced. I mean, we had friends that were Puerto Rican, and you know, they were called gringos. And,
well, I mean,
and I couldn't tell the difference. I wasn't sure if they were. It came out later, you know, when in conversation when they were talking to us, tell us they were Puerto Rican, but I wasn't sure what they, you know, nationality or their race or whatever was. But anyway, they were referred to as gringos by the Ticos. So.
and of course, Jim Dandy disagrees when he says, "I've lived here more than 20 years. I know what gringo means." Well, the Costa Ricans and the Ticos did not coin the term gringo, and gringo might have a different meaning in Costa Rica than it actually does. But if you go and look up the definition and where the word gringo comes from, you might want to, if you're an honorable person, well, next week you'd say, "You know what, Alan, you was right."
Well, the thing is, it can mean something different to different.
It definitely could mean something different to other people.
As they say, terms tend to migrate. They, you know, it started out meaning a certain
Well,
thing.
I mean, come on, it's like today, someone says, "Man, that's a sick ride you got." Hey, the car doesn't have an illness. Yeah, terms get different words as you go along. So anyway, hey, yeah, you know, I like to have fun because this is my channel, so I can say what I want. But I like to have fun. And look, you don't have to agree with me. Say what you want, but I'll definitely throw it on the screen.
Look, Randy is helping out. He with what war it was.
Oh, thanks, Randy. He says it does come from the Mexico conflict with the United States. Other countries have picked up the term and personalized it to their culture. Hey, that's a pretty good definition, Randy. Thanks for your input on that. So, hey, get off that rabbit trail. We'll get back to are the Ticos prejudiced? So, hey, to a point.
If they are prejudiced, like towards white people or black people or whatever, I've not experienced them saying anything. They may think it, but they tend to treat everybody.
That's a good point.
Like when you're in a restaurant or you're in the grocery store, you're in public, they don't like call you any kind of name or treat you a different way. At least that hasn't been my experience. And we've had dark friends that have been here and they didn't experience anything like that. I mean, other than getting the gringo price.
Well, yeah,
you know,
but that's going to be every foreigner that comes here going to get the gringo price at some point or another.
Yeah.
Now, you might not know you got the gringo price, and you're going to get it. So, anyway, you know, the point here is that, and Jim Dandy's a little bit right to a point that, hey, there are going to be, like Rebecca said, there are going to be Ticos that are prejudiced, but they're definitely not going to come out and say it because Ticos are not confrontational. And, you know, so if I'm having a bad day and like Rebecca says, you can kind of see it on me and a Tico picks up on it, he's not going to say anything. Now, if I don't treat him right, you can bet that whatever I'm needing, I ain't getting no help because they're passive aggressive. So they're not going to call you out on it. Whereas, hey, I'll call somebody out. I don't have a problem calling somebody out. It's just the kind of individual I am. I'll tell you, hey, you're wrong. In my opinion, you're wrong. I'll tell you you're a crook if I've had an experience with you. And so anyway, I'm just that kind of person. I don't mind confrontation, but I'm not going to get ugly and I'm not ready to, hey, look, oh man, I'm going to knock you out. I will take care of myself and defend my family. I ain't out starting no fights because I really don't care if you're right or wrong. But I do enjoy sharing my perspective and I enjoy getting the truth out there. I do want you to get the truth about living in Costa Rica.
We welcome other people's perspectives and their experiences because that gives a more flavorful, you know, talk, having different people's experiences. So feel free to share. Right or wrong doesn't really matter. When it's your, I mean, right or wrong does matter, but in life, but like with this podcast, or this live, you know, if you have a different opinion, feel free to share it, you know,
Absolutely.
because as we say, our experience is very limited. Our perspective is limited to our experience.
Yeah, I mean, we probably have more experience than anybody out there because we have traveled all over Costa Rica. And most people come to Costa Rica and they live in one or two places, you know. So it ain't, you know, it's just I love learning and I love teaching and I love sharing, and you know, I like to be able to get the truth out there. You know, in doing my research, I saw and listened to so much misinformation, and you know, a lot of times there's misinformation. And it's most of the time it's not intentional. They just were here. You know, one video, this girl was talking about how every Tico is bilingual and you don't really need to learn Spanish. Well, she was totally wrong, but she admitted that she had only been here 2 months and she had mainly stayed in the San Jose metropolitan area. Okay.
Yeah. So from her perspective, she was correct.
That's right. From her very limited perspective of 2 months in Costa Rica.
But if you travel around like we have, we've been to a lot of rural areas where the older generation, a lot of them do not speak English, but the children, the next generations are being taught in school. And so a lot of them do speak English and they like to practice their English. And I like, Muka says, I call myself a gringo to the locals, and we do that too. We refer to ourselves as gringos. But the funny thing is, you know, I don't take offense to that. It doesn't offend me at all. But I think maybe the Ticos think it might be offensive because when it's in my presence, they'll refer to us as the Americans instead of the gringos, which we don't care, you know.
Say that again?
They refer to us as the Americans. When we're talking to Ticos, like I've overheard them talking about referring to us, like when they're on the phone trying to get a price for us or something like that, it'd be like, the Americans want to know how much, you know, whatever, something like that.
Yeah, well, you know, it's kind of like Muka there. When I'm working together with the Ticos and we're having a good old time and stuff, and we're just kind of cutting up back and forth, I call myself the local gringo, and we all have a good laugh. And they know I'm kind of local because some of the stuff I do, but we're just having fun. And so, hey, gringo is not a derogatory term. Neither is being called a Tico or a Nico, or you know, those are just different terms that are used for different people. So just a thought out there, okay? So. But, you know, you will find, and Jeremy Brock says here, he's looking forward to visiting San Vito and hopefully soon. And, you know, if you go to San Vito, you know, it's really an amazing place. And that place is, it's very raw Costa Rica, but it also has an Italian influence because San Vito was settled by Italians. And, of course, we lived there for a long time, really enjoyed that area. But you're going to find that as you travel all over Costa Rica, you're going to find places that just have all these different feelings, which kind of brings me back to, you know, we were saying earlier about how many people of color or how many Black people we've seen on the Pacific side. So, you know, just like there are a lot of expats that come to Costa Rica, and some expats, they like to settle where other expats are, so that they can still kind of have kind of a small expat community and they can kind of talk English to one another, kind of feel like they're still in the United States. I don't want to do that. If I wanted to feel like that, I'd stay in the United States.
Well, it's not just.
My point is that, you know, if you're like that, and if you're a Black person coming to Costa Rica and you prefer to be around a lot of other Black people, well, you probably should go check out the Vibe over in the Puerto Viejo, the Caribbean side. You might not like it, and you might. We have some Black friends that they absolutely loved it over there. Okay,
well, we have a lot of white friends. We have a lot of white friends that loved it over there.
Just all
it's not about the skin color, because you can be a Black person from the United States, and I tell you, on the Caribbean side, the Black people there, it's Jamaican, Caribbean, it's what is it, Turks and those little small islands that are right around there, where one of your clients is from. They're little small islands. Anyway, it's not. It's culture. You know.
Well, you know, and that's
okay,
kind of,
because
well,
like Canadians, the Canadians go and they tend to. There's a place like around Estoril that's called Canadian Hill because they all settled, you know, in that
same little
area. It's an area, and why? Because you share the same culture.
That's right.
You know, it's not about skin color. You can have black Canadians, white Canadians, green Canadians.
But my point is, if you are a black person and you like to be around a lot of other black people, well, you're probably not going to find that on the Pacific side. You will find that on the Caribbean side. However, you always hear about how dangerous the Lemoyne side is. Oh, it's not safe. It's not safe. And anytime a white person says that, well, almost always people of color will say, "Oh, sound like you're prejudiced to me." The Lemoyne side or Caribbean side is not unsafe because of the color of skin of the people that's there. It's unsafe because it is a port city. Lots of cargo ships, lots of drugs. That's what makes it unsafe. It's not the people themselves. Now, does drug bring kind of the wrong people? Absolutely. So do keep that in mind. Now, good common sense, you know, keeps you safe no matter where you are, whether you're on the Caribbean side or on the Pacific side.
Right. Well, Limon is a port city, like you were saying, and it has a lot of crime. There are gangs. You know, that's what makes it. I don't even know what kind of gangs, you know, I don't know if they're Tico gangs or they're foreign gangs that are there watching cargo or what's going on with it. But that's the city. Limon is also a city inside of the
Lemoyne province.
But like when you get around Cauida or Puerto Viejo, Punta Uva, and those areas, those are tourist areas, and there's not gang crime or anything like that over there. It's it could be dangerous after hours because theft maybe, but and there's a lot of drugs. There's more drugs on that side. I find it's more family oriented. I find on the Pacific side, and more party on the Caribbean side.
Well, it's what Jeremy Brock is saying, and what a channel that I was watching, and this black person said it exactly what Jeremy Brock was saying. He says, if you're out late at night looking for trouble anywhere, you'll find it. Okay.
Yeah, it's like that all over the world. Yeah,
this black guy I was watching earlier today. He's a black guy, a very country black guy, and he says, dude, he says, if you know, I wouldn't be out in the Bronx in the middle of the night looking for a place to eat. You know, he's black. No, he ain't going to do it. He said he wouldn't be in Tennessee looking for a barbecue place to eat at and late at night. He says, no matter where you go late at night, if you're looking for trouble, you can find trouble. So, hey, and that's true anywhere. Now, is it easier to get in trouble on the Lemoyne side? Yes. Why is that? Well, because every single time we went out to eat, not with the exception of one time, every single time Rebecca and I went to go eat somewhere, I would have not just one, 2 or 3 people say, hey, dude, want a joint? Want some marijuana? No, I'm cool. How about some cocaine? No, I got enough. You know, it's like every time you turn around, somebody was, and oh, just say no. It doesn't matter about just say no. Yes, of course, I say no, but that does mean that there is more. You're subject to more drugs. You're subject to more problems, more theft, which means, you know, like anywhere, don't leave your possessions in your car where it can be seen because they'll break that window. Seen it happen a lot when we were there on the Caribbean side.
Well,
so
and you're talking about like when we would go out like after 6 for supper at these different restaurants that were along the beach.
Well, that's the only place we went to go eat.
Well, I know, but we ate lunch sometimes at different places. So what I was about to say is when I'm going to the grocery store there or went to the national park, nobody approached me like that. You know, nobody came and said, you want to, you know, I have some drugs. Do you want drugs? It was very regular, you know, but what you're talking about is being
And you might not have ever, maybe you weren't approached. Every time I went out, I got approached. They might not approach a woman, but they will approach a guy. I can guarantee you that every single time I went out, somebody asked me if I wanted drugs. Every time. Every single time.
Even when you went to the grocery store in Coweta, you went to the grocery store.
Somebody, probably not if I went.
That's what I was saying.
I can tell you that more times than not, someone was asking me if I wanted drugs. You know, it's just that available over there.
And it's commonplace. It's the culture.
Yeah, it's the culture down there. And you know, for me, I'm just not a druggie. And look, I don't judge anybody. I think you should do what you want with your own life. But, you know, anyway, we're just talking about it's a different culture. And we're talking about, you know, are Ticos racist? Are they prejudiced? Or would you experience prejudice if you come here as a person of color, whether you're black or whatever color you are? Now, you know, as I'm talking about that, here's something that I think is just extremely important. Really, I don't think anybody should define themselves by the color of their skin. Okay. Hey, I'm not a white guy. You're not a black guy. You're just a person to me. And for me, the way I look at it is, hey, we all bleed the same color. And I think we should really, you're not defined by the color of your skin. You're defined by who you are up here, who you are right here. So whoever you are in your mind and in your heart, well, then that's who you are. But if you allow people to define you by the color of your skin, well, that just puts you in a box, and you should definitely not let people define you by the color of your skin. So anyway, that's my rant on that. That's just my opinion. Okay.
Yeah. And I feel like even if you would come to if a black family would come to the Caribbean, to the Pacific side, even though there are not a lot of black people in the population, I don't think they would be treated any way differently. You know, would definitely be accepted and not treated as anything other than just a regular person. So there are Chinese families here. There's all kinds of different cultures. You know,
especially over on the Caribbean side.
But not a big population of any one culture.
Right. Over on the Caribbean side, I think on the Caribbean side, there's more of a melting pot of people there because of all of the different people that came in, you know, for the labor and the opportunity to make money. And so you had Jamaicans and a lot of just different people. So there's really a rich culture on the Caribbean side. Beautiful waters. And so it really, you can get some flavorful food. You've heard me talk about Costa Rican food and how the Costa Rican food doesn't have any flavor. And it doesn't. It's their signs say typical Costa Rican food. And so when you compare that to the food that we're used to, Cajun food and all the spices and stuff, hey, Tico food, it's flavorless. But Jamaican food and on the Caribbean side, I often say that if you only visited the Caribbean side of Costa Rica, you didn't experience the typical Costa Rican that, you know, the typical Costa Rica that most people do that's on the Pacific side, because it's very, very, very different. Just a whole nother culture over there, okay? Ticos just are not I wouldn't say they're not a fan of spices, because if I've seen, you know, there's several restaurants that are owned by foreigners. I know one that's owned by someone in Switzerland. And you know, anyway, a lot of any of these other restaurants that have flavorful food, Ticos will jam pack that thing.
Well, we went this week when we had to go to town to get supplies. So we got to eat at a restaurant, and we tried a new restaurant that just opened. And the owners are from Uruguay, something like that.
Uruguay.
And so it was different. The flavor, it was a lot of grilled meats with a lot of flavor, and I liked it. It was good.
And it was jam packed with Ticos. Mm-hmm. You know, so you know, when and you know, kind of like Muka says here. Muka says, well, they don't like spices as much in Costa Rica. And I don't know if I agree with that statement, because we've seen, hey, I've had Tico families eating some of my food, and they absolutely like my food. And sometimes might say it's a little too spicy. But I've seen Ticos flood some of these restaurants that have really good, flavorful food. But when it comes to hot food, I would agree with Muka if he's talking about they're not a fan of hot food. Most Ticos I would agree. I would say that.
Yeah, they don't like spice. Look, Randy says, yeah, it's
Yeah, and
Uruguay.
what Luke was saying, I just mean typical. Yeah,
Yeah,
typically
typically.
most Ticos don't actually flavor their food. It's a very natural food.
Not a lot of salt.
Yeah, not much. Yeah, and thank you, Randy. That's the word we were looking for. Uruguay is the restaurant, and it's called Cordon's Restaurant, if I pronounce that right. Great place to go eat, by the way. So, anyway, you know, if you come here, I don't think I can almost absolutely 100% say that if you're an expat or you're a foreigner and you're leaving wherever you're at, I don't care where it's at, I don't think you're going to have any problem. If you're Chinese and you come over here, and that's a whole nother people of color, very white, okay, Chinese, and they come over, there's probably, you know, I'm just guessing. I wouldn't know this is fact, but I would say there's probably more Chinese here than any other nationality, because the Chinese have favor and are encouraged to open up businesses and stuff, and that's simply because China and Costa Rica has an agreement, and so there's a lot of Chinese stores, and so anyway, so if you're Chinese and you come to Costa Rica, you can really get into a lot of Chinese communities, and anyway, and so you can find a lot of Chinese food. So anyway, I think Chinese is probably a big sect. Of course, you do have a lot of gringos that are living here, but and you get a lot of Canadians, of course. So, you know, and I don't know in what order it is, but I think probably, you know, I don't know which one would be more. Do you think
we have to look at the statistics anyway, because in almost
the top three, I would say, would be the United States, would be people from America, United States, Canadians, and Chinese, I would think, but I don't know that. I don't have facts. It's just my opinion. And Randy asked a good question right here. He says, well, how do you think people with disabilities are treated? Hey, I think people with disabilities are treated with a lot of favor, okay? Now, when I say are treated with a lot of favor, that you see a lot of disabled people that are walking around begging. I don't think they're treated with favor, okay? Because there are typical con men who are lying about being sick, walking with a cane or whatever, looking for just free money. There are actual disabled people that are wanting some money. But for the most part, if you're just a disabled person doing your thing, living your life, supporting yourself, then you're going to find out that you are definitely not treated any different. You are treated with favor and respect and given favoritism when you go to the bank. You give, you know, if you're in a wheelchair, if you're in a walker, if you whatever, then you're treated with favor. You know, there's a lot. The one thing that does upset me is that there's a lot of handicapped parking spots in Costa Rica. And of course, like everywhere there, it's mandatory to have a certain number of handicapped parking spots. But there's very few actual handicapped people using those spots. And so it's not uncommon to see Ticos parking anywhere and everywhere, and there's nobody enforcing it. Nobody's getting a fine because some knucklehead parked in a handicapped spot. And in some cases, well, you know, you got at one store, he's got 3 parking spots, and one of them has to be a handicapped spot. And so it's constantly full, and there's always people parking in it. That's part of the reason. Isn't an excuse to use it. No, it's not. But still, it happens. So just to kind of give you an idea of what actually happens in Costa Rica. People with disabilities, pregnant people, they're all treated with favor, in my opinion.
Yeah, the elderly are treated with a lot of respect. But a disadvantage, something that we're used to in the United States is, you know, over the last probably 40 years, I guess, the United States started implementing wheelchair ramps and wide access restrooms, you know, so that wheelchairs could get in, and thinking of handicapped people. And that's not made it all the way out. Yes. in some of the rural areas. As much as I love San Isidro, and it's growing, but it doesn't have that much, you know, they have handicapped parking, but then no ramp to get into the stores. Now the new builds, like the Super Colonial,
all the new builds are required to have a ramp.
Yeah,
and some of the existing ones, some of the old ones don't have one yet.
Yeah.
but they are pushing for them to have a handicap access.
Yeah. But there's not a lot of sidewalks, and if there are sidewalks, they're not smooth.
Yeah.
They're not.
And if by chance you're as old as dirt, or maybe as old as Eduardo, I don't know what that age limit is, but Eduardo's old as dirt. He says when he goes to the banks, he gets a free pass in line because he's a good-looking old man. So I don't know what the actual age is, but when you do get to be older, yes, older people get first access into the bank, along with handicapped, pregnant people as well.
And the grocery stores too. Most grocery stores, the Ticos allow older people to go first. They move out of the way and let them go.
Yeah, absolutely. So we absolutely love Costa Rica, and I do love that Costa Rica is not racist or prejudiced. Now, I got one more thing that I want to say when it comes to being racist. In my opinion, and a lot of black actors, so we were buffering there for a moment, but let me back up to say, hey, while the United States and a lot of these black actors that I respect greatly say the same thing. They say the reason that we actually have a racist problem in the United States is because you keep talking about it. It's because the government keeps talking about it. We don't have a racist problem in the United States. We have a Democrat government that continues to remind you that you're black, continues to remind me I'm white. We have a government that's constantly trying to separate people, because if they separate people, then they can divide people. So if we could all join together, stop listening to you're black, you're white, you're Chinese, you're Mexican, we wouldn't have a racial problem in the United States. But I don't think that's ever going to happen, because as long as our government is divided, and it will always be divided, then the government's always going to remind you of what color you are. And it's totally up to you and to me to not listen to color and not be defined by the color of your skin, and to realize that, hey, if we would all gang together and not create videos on what's it like to be a Mexican, what's it like to be black, what's it like to be whatever color you are, then guess what? We wouldn't be prejudiced, so we wouldn't have a racial problem. That's my opinion, and that's what a lot of people agree with. We got to stop defining ourselves by color and by culture, but recognize each other's culture and get along with each other. And I agree with what Randy says. He says, hey, if we could just all listen to God and do what he says, not the government, we could get along a whole lot better. And of course, like Ravelin is saying here, he said, yeah, it's always the government with their gaslighting campaigns, and they're always trying to divide people. Hey, I'm glad that Muka brought this up. Muka said he asked two of his Marine Corps buddies if they get racism in the East United States, and both have said no. And hey, I was a Marine for 3 years in North Carolina before I went on for another little over 3 years. Okay, so being in South Louisiana, I grew up in a place where, like I said, could be very racist. Most of the black people lived on the other side of the tracks, which was considered the I can't even remember what it was called. But anyway, the black people lived on the other side of the tracks. The white people lived on this side of the tracks. I spent a whole lot of time on that side of the tracks, and I'd go to the black bar down there, and I'd walk in the black bar with my buddy who was black, okay, and I wasn't old enough to be in the bar, and anyway, I'd have to sit in the back, and hey, and I'd walk in, and the black people would say, oh, we got some fungus among us, and so I didn't let it bother me any, but my point was there, I could have easily been very racist, and I saw it. That's the way I was brought up. Well, then I went to North Carolina on the East Coast, and that was really the first time that I saw where there was a white and black couple. Okay, so that was the first time, and I saw a lot of black and white couples. So over on the East Coast, it wasn't nowhere near as racist or prejudiced as it was where I grew up in the South. So I agree with you completely, Muka. Over on the East Coast, I didn't see near the prejudice issues or the racist issues. Now, that was years and years and years and years ago. Heck, man, that's 40, 50 years ago, I don't think we have a racial issue anymore. That's just my opinion. Now, we didn't call it the ghetto back then. I can't remember what it was called on the other side of the, but anyway, it was across. It'll come to me. But anyway, I can't remember what it was called, but we didn't call it the ghetto. But anyhow, we did. Everybody had a term for it. But anyhow. So, hey, if I haven't asked your question, if I haven't answered your question, and please put your question in the chat box right now. Our hour is almost up. And Eduardo, along with a whole lot of other people, I absolutely love, attending our live broadcast. And he's like, hey, the votes keep coming in. The yeses are 1,033 for a 2-hour live, with 68 saying no.
I don't think I could do a 2-hour, especially on some topics like this topic.
This topic, I've covered everything I could possibly cover when it comes to talking about racist or prejudice, because it just is a non-existent thing in Costa Rica. And hey, we've done some 2-hour and 3-hour lives in the past, a long time ago. Yeah. And while it's always
we would talk
fun,
about everything.
Oh, we talk about everything. While it was fun, Doug Dillo agrees with us. He's like, yeah, 2 hours would be too long. Doug would get tired and he'd have to go take a nap. I think I'd get tired too. Actually, I could go on and on and on. I love talking. I love sharing. And it really is a lot of fun. But anyway, hey, if I haven't answered your question, now's the time to do it. I always want to say, hey, we greatly appreciate all of you. We especially, I don't say it enough, that, we greatly appreciate the many supporters that we have in our members-only community. We don't have anything to sell on our channel. We give everything away for free. But hey, there's 3 ways that you can connect to us real easy and get all your information about Costa Rica for free. Number 1, join the live. Ask questions, get your answers. Hey, if we don't get you a question, well, then you can always find the answer on one of the many hundreds of videos we have, or you can schedule a phone consultation where we'll talk to you and help you really get focused on moving to Costa Rica and getting you the information you need to know. And hey, third, you can actually join the members-only community. 33 cents a day. If that's too expensive for you, you probably should not move to Costa Rica, because you're going to find Costa Rica is expensive. But that's a great way just to say thank you. We got lots of people that are in the community. A lot of them don't ever actually comment. It's just their way to say, we greatly support you. You don't have a Patreon, and we support you in the community. And hey, $10 a month. We just want to acknowledge that we appreciate you taking the time, making these videos, giving us the good, the bad, and the ugly about Costa Rica, because we are the only channel giving you all of the facts, because we're simply not trying to sell you Costa Rica. We don't have any products and services to sell you. We just love to share our experience. So I'm going to breeze through here. And of course, Doug asked a quick question. He may not even be asking me this. He might be asking someone else. But he asked, how far are we from San Isidro? And so we are about 3 hours away from San Isidro, but that's only because we're very high in the mountains. We are a long way. And so, and of course, what Doug Dillo says, he says, for 33 cents a day, you too can save a gringo. You're absolutely right. Matter of fact, 33 cents a day, I promise you, you'll save thousands upon thousands of dollars from the information you're going to learn, especially when you have a question and you get direct access to me. So kind of like Randy says, he says, hey, the community is absolutely great. He enjoys it. Folks, we really appreciate you. And hey, it is time for us to rock and roll. Hey, thank you so much for joining us today. Remember, next week, we will not have our live, so we'll pick up the following Sunday. And I kind of wonder, do you think we'll get done with the house in 2 weeks?
I don't think so.
She's laughing. she don't have a whole lot of faith in this Marine. Was it the Marine, or is it, Costa Rica is always an adventure?
Yeah, Costa Rica's an adventure.
Ah, good save. All right, folks. I can't wait to see you the next time that we're on the Unbridled Living in Costa Rica podcast.
Ciao.